Hi, everybody. Welcome to my first episode of Crisis of the Brain podcast. In this podcast, we're going to go over a lot of mental health stuff because that seems to be a significant problem in our generation and just in general. And if you notice, like throughout the years that we've been having more mental health awareness, like depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders, and we have like hospitals and stuff and they do a lot of good work. We have like therapists and psychiatrists and nurses who really help out and are really like trying their best. But I feel like there's a lot more improvement to be done personally. So I want to put awareness around like the stigma for mental health and like how it like affects like people, like especially like adolescents, because like all of us are adolescents. And like yeah, and how and like I still feel like a lot of people are not like looking at how like mental health really affects people, or like not even believing it in general. Like I've met people and like seen situations where just like people just don't believe in mental health and it just goes in a very sour way. And yeah, so I'm inviting my friend Skylar. He has a schizophrenia, and both of us had been in mental hospitals, and we're gonna talk about our experience and like the stigma and like dealing with like mental health and stuff like that. So thank you for listening. Can you reveal yourself, Skylar?
Hello, I'm Skylar. Any questions for me uh, or anything of the sort?
Yeah, so I wanted to like, so we both been in like mental health hospitals. Like you've been there longer than me because like I'm only diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and ODD. But you're diagnosed with what are you diagnosed with?
Oh, good Lord, that's a huge list. Depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, ADHD. There's a whole list, and it just goes down and down and down. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like so I kind of want to like touch on like parts of it, like as in like how you deal with it in like a social setting and like a school setting. Like for example, like myself, like having like depression and like anxiety, and just like everyone has like insecurities, but like a lot of like overthinking stuff, and like with like for example with like anxiety there comes like a lot of trust issues where like a friend like doesn't like answer your text in like 15 minutes, and then you start overthinking. Well, not to that scale, but it could be. But yeah.
No, that happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
um, well, my life is mainly pretty normal, except when I'm having these episodes where I'm hearing things and seeing things. And usually that doesn't happen at school because I'm with friends. And usually when I'm with friends, things aren't as bad because you have people to lift you up. So that's an important aspect in adolescence life because your friends always bring you up, hopefully. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I agree though. Like having a good support system really helps and stuff like that. Like having like a good amount of friends, like not good amount of friends, but like a good like a close group of like friends who like really care about you, and like true friends and like good parents and stuff. All like all the time, we can't have those resources all the time. Based on that, where like
Mhm.
a majority of the people who are affected by mental health are like minors, and we don't really have a lot of control over our life, or like we go to school, or like our relationship with parents and stuff like that. Because like parents, like in the sense of like if like in mental health facilities and like therapists, like they'll acknowledge that there are problems that are like wrong with like parents and stuff like that, but you don't really see, like they can't change them because they're adults, like, and it's very hard for adults to change. And like yeah, they care and stuff like that, but I don't see it, like you're not gonna really see much change from them, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Which is unfortunate because a lot of adolescents, parent, or most of them are supportive, I've seen, but sometimes you don't really. In the hospital, there's a lot of kids that don't have that support system, and we're lucky that our parents, or I assume that your parents support you. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, I guess we just lucked out.
yeah. And so like, and like I want to see like a change is like also like a lot of like supportive like parents and like a good support system, like because that really will just like help in the long run and make things like so much better. Because I feel like especially like with like professionals, they really value like a support system. Like if you remember, like when they would admit you into a hospital, that like one of the questions would be, do you have a stable support system? Who is your stable support system? And
Yeah.
yeah, but also like I want to look at stuff like kind of like the stigma of like how mental health is. Like I remember when I was first admitted into a hospital, my dad was like, "Oh, you're going to jail. Like this is the closest thing to jail. You can't do this again. Like I'm not gonna expect this again." And of course, that's like high expectations, but like it's also like, yeah, of course, I did stuff wrong. I did stuff to myself. I did bad like. I put bad stuff in my body. I did bad stuff to my like my physical body and like and it comes into me mentally, but also and like I did make mistakes with other relationships, but also like we're still kids, like we're completely human, like the quote says, like before this like podcast begins, like we're not patients, we're human, and we're just a lot of us are just kids. And I don't know, it's like when like we're put in like to like a mental hospital, yeah, it's scary because there's all these precautions. We're like wheeled in on like a stretcher or we have handcuffs on. And like I don't understand. I kind of like I understand at times like there's gonna be people who like are having episodes or like do have like anger problems and get mad and try to lash out, but like not all of them have to. Like if like, and I also feel like with like okay, so like most people that I met in like a mental health hospital, like who like come into like a hospital, what happens to them is that like they're usually escorted by the police, right? Like I don't know if that's happened to you.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember February, but yeah, that happened to me. And I agree with what you're saying. Like these things can be dehumanizing.
Yeah, especially when like you're trying to have treatment. I understand being like restraining someone who's having an episode or calming them down. I would say calming them down is probably the best situation that you can go through. But like I feel like, and there are different like services for mental health and like other alternatives to calling for mental health instead of just like 911. But like I feel like that's not like known. Like I like figured it out like a few months ago, and I've been like looking in and like researching and been part of like this system of like mental health for like a few months now, like almost like literally a year. And yeah, people just don't know about that, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I've gone through therapy pretty much my whole life. So I've known about that stuff since I was like 5. So ever since then, my first hospitalization was back in 2017. Um, and ever since then, that was a traumatizing experience for me, at least, because they were not that great. Because in New York, I'm from New York. So as you know, um, these workers are from the state, they're not trained. So yeah, you just have a bunch of untrained adults that don't really care for your well-being. So it was a traumatizing experience that I really hope no other child has to experience.
Yeah, like even like I was in a PHP program like a month or two back, and like just the direct like that for people who don't know, that's like a mental health care, but it's a half day thing where like for example mine was like I think it was 7 to like 3 o'clock, and the director there like I know like all these people are there in mental health, and like I know like it depends on what they're doing. You can't tell for sure, but I'd like to think and I like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're here to like they want to help people. But like but like with her she was I don't know, like I felt me and like other patients there just felt, and like even other like counselors who like worked under her like felt that like she like was very judgmental, and like the reason why you're here was not to get help. The reason why you're here was just to correct your behavior to fit in a certain category and stay there, and just kind of like juvie or like jail and stuff like that. And I just didn't really like that.
Yeah, that happens. I came across a cop, not a cop. He was actually, what was he? He was like the head cop. I don't know what to call that, but E. Cooper, he had said some things to me like, you can't fight back. You're going to juvie. He's threatening me with all these things. And I'm sitting there in a hospital gown in the ER, like, dude, I just got detained from school in front of all my friends, and this is what you're telling me. This is what you're going to say to me. You're not going to comfort me. You're not going to, you're a cop. You're supposed to be helping the population, not bringing them down.
Yeah, and you were like 14 to like early 15, right, at that time?
Yeah, I'd say I was just turned 15 in December. So yeah.
Yeah, and so like it's the same. Like it's the same kind of system of people that's like the human mind is adolescent brain is still developing at that time, and I like that's completely true. Like stuff like I can understand how things like overuse of electronics, like manipulators and stimulators and drugs and stuff like that will definitely like affect a person. But if you like, I understand that that's good, but you need to keep in mind that this is also a developing mind. This is a minor. This is a person who's not independent of themselves. And when you put them in a situation where they seem more of like independent in the sense, independent in like a bad way, where they're not with their family, they're not with their security blanket, like they're just alone. They're just alone and they don't know what's going on. Their parents aren't there, and they don't know what's gonna happen to them because there's so much like stories of people who like they think they might go to jail, they think they might go somewhere. Just because like if there's always like this stigma of mental health that I've seen where like you're like you're like in a cushioned room that's padlocked and you're in a straitjacket. So like the most you could do is like be comforting. And yeah, some are, but like not a lot.
Yeah, for sure. That is the basis that society has drawn for mental health, at least in the past. I mean, they still have stuff like that today, which is unfortunate, but sometimes you have to do it in order to keep others and yourself safe. So, that's like the last resort. So, I mean, at least we're not regressing. We're only progressing.
Yeah. But the thing that like another thing that worries me though is that like I see like when like usually when you're put into a mental hospital, like yeah, sure, mental hospital or inpatient or outpatient, it's not really your parents who come out of their pocket to pay for it because it's really expensive. It's the insurance of the parents, like the health insurance, which
Yeah.
is good and all. But I've seen like cases of like or like kids like with like depression or like severe anxiety and they're kicked out of inpatient into the real world and they have like major depression because their insurance just doesn't want to pay for it anymore. And like it's kind of going into like political stuff like healthcare and like free healthcare and stuff like that. But like like it's like throwing someone who like has their arm cut off that's bleeding out on the street because like you're like as a like when you have a mental disorder, like it's a disorder, you're sick and you need help, and like all the pretty much all the time they want help, like of course there's people who like deny it, and that's why we keep people there for like against their will. Not we, but like they keep people against their will. But it's be like a lot of the time, and yeah, there's a few cases where people just shouldn't be there, and we can touch on that a little later. But they usually need help and they know that they want help deep inside, or they know it and they're trying to process and trying to get help, but the system just kicks them out and they just can't get the help they need.
Yeah, for sure. Insurance is a big issue because we are privately insured. So, for certain things, it was a hassle to get them to cover it. Yeah, yeah, that does touch in politics, which is a completely different topic. um, yeah,
Yeah. Have you experienced like the mental health stigma with like having schizophrenia and like seeing things and stuff like that and people thinking like yeah.
yeah. Well, no, which is good. When I was at the hospital last week, no one was like, "You're crazy." No one was like, "This is wrong. You're gonna stay here forever," which is a good thing. And heck, maybe even only 50 years ago, that would be seen as crazy, and you'd be thrown into the padded room and straitjacketed. You would be locked up, and they would do things like electroshock therapy. And the weird thing, the most dehumanizing thing that I experienced there was them suggesting electroshock therapy, which is when they attach, if you don't know, it's when they attach these little things to your head and they shock you. It's not very, hard, or painful, but I was like, is that really what you think of me? So
Did
I was just, yeah,
no did they suggest that like when you
they,
were at caps?
yeah, they did. And I'm like, you know, I don't think that's the best idea. I don't know why
Yeah.
you guys are expressing this to someone who is 15.
Yeah. And like person like yeah, and like I've heard like and like I feel like with mental health too, like not like with schizo like other disorders that are like more popular, not more popular, but ones that appear more often, like schizophrenia or I'd say like for example depression. I hear this like there's like also like like there's two kind of stigmas around depression which I can see. It's like one where like, oh, they're attention seeking, all they want to do is attention, they just want people to feel bad for them when people just literally can't avoid it. And then there's other people who like will throw that word around like, oh, I'm depressed, my mom didn't let me go hang out with my friends tonight, I'm depressed, or like I didn't get the food I wanted, I'm depressed and stuff like that. And like
Yeah.
hearing like someone who's like been through that, that's like really like, depending on the person, but that could be like really offensive and like honestly like
Mhm.
triggering for some people.
Yeah, yeah. I've had people do that before, and I'm just sitting there like, are you really though? Are
Yeah,
you
like
really depressed about not getting your Chick-fil-A?
yeah, like I don't think so. Like I understand, like there I can understand there's times where like you might like see symptoms of like stuff and be like, not exactly self-diagnosed, but maybe I should look into that. Maybe I should see if there's like I could use some extra help to make my quality of life better. But like when you like self-diagnose and people tell people, oh yeah, I'm on my period, so I have mood swings, or just like my mom, or like my mom said I can't go somewhere, I'm gonna have mood swings, and like then they're like, oh, I'm bipolar. Like I'm bipolar. Like sometimes I'm like really happy and sometimes I'm really sad. Like you shouldn't say that because you never really know until like you talk to a professional.
Yeah, and with bipolar, I do have bipolar. It's the highs are, at a certain level, it's different for everyone, but the lows are very low. Um, uh, and it can get really bad. So having bipolar and depression, the lows are even lower. So I hear people saying, "Oh, I'm so bipolar," and I'm like, "No, you're not."
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, what's your experience with like like outside like care, like out like with like
outpatient.
I guess outpatient more than like clinical care, like where you go like to Kaiser and like see a psychiatrist or you see a therapist at a private practice.
Yeah, so basically outpatient. It's been a pretty good experience. All the therapists I have were really supportive. They would listen. Same thing with my psychiatrist. Or yeah, they would always listen, give me the medications I needed. Um, yeah, I overall had a pretty good experience with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a really really good thing. But personally, like there's like with therapists, it kind of fits like the mold of like you go to like talk to your feelings and they give you advice or they let you vent or something like that or teach you like coping skills to and strategies to like make yourself do better in those like high stress situations or crises. But like with psychiatrists, like I see a psychiatrist too from Kaiser and a therapist from a private practice. With like what one thing that I did learn is that if you're just going mainly to a psychiatrist, I don't think you're really going to get anywhere. Because like there are a few psychiatrists, but you're not going to find them in like popular places like Kaiser. Like mostly in private practice, you'll find like psychiatrists who also play the role as a therapist. But most psychiatrists, from what I've heard from like my therapist and like him like seeing it myself, and is that like they're not really there to like tell you what to do or like talk to you or anything, like ask you questions and like be on like a keyboard and like typing stuff, and then they'll like diagnose you with like a disorder and give you medication and then be on your way. And yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much their job. They're not really supposed to be therapy. They're there if you need them, though, hopefully. But that's what a therapist is for, from what my
Yeah.
experience is. So that's
Yeah.
why most people go to both.
Yeah, I don't really see like at least mine, like he's well respected and I do like him a lot. He's a pretty cool guy. But like I don't think they're really supposed to like really do anything. I'm not sure because like I remember one time like I used to go to psychiatrist meetings with my mom and dad, but it was and we entered a meeting and like in a phone because of like COVID. And my dad, like me and my dad are having a fight, and even though he started like telling my psychiatrist about what I was doing wrong, and like even though like I didn't like it because of course like it's stuff like that. Like I mean like no one's gonna like criticism. Like you can take it, but like I don't think a lot of people are gonna like it. Like it takes a lot of mastery. And if you do, like I respect you a lot. But and what was I saying? So like and he started telling my like psychiatrist stuff, and my psychiatrist was basically like I don't want to hear it. I'm just here to prescribe you medication. I was like, well, that like, I mean, like, yeah, so like anyone can understand that's a bit like weird to like see.
Yeah, usually they do listen, but they usually just listen, maybe give a little advice, but that shouldn't be happening. You should probably talk to someone about that. Um, but yeah, but my experience overall has been pretty good.
Yeah. And just like to wrap this up, like I want to hear like your plan for like if you have not a plan, but like what you could see that like solutions that could like make the mental health system even better. Because as like the time goes on, and like as life becomes more competitive in jobs and stuff like that, we need to like keep going with like the care and stuff. Like I just
Mm,
want to know what you think.
Going forward, I really think that mental hospitals or any place of the sort should be less dehumanizing. There at CAPS there was a big sign that said high AWOL risk, and I'm like, well, why would you put high AWOL risk? That's so dehumanizing. Kids are gonna see that and they're gonna think, oh, I'm just another kid coming through here that's had just problematic. Um, is that really how I'm seen? Um, I think that we should take a step back and look at our healthcare system all abroad, like all abroad, like every part of our healthcare system, because like one part of your healthcare system can affect a different part. Um, so I think that we need to look at that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like making it like it seem more humanizing and not making like like what we want to do like with any sickness. Like of course like stuff happens like with like disorders and stuff like that. It happens here in genetics. It happens with what you see in life. It happens with your living situation. But like you can't make it seem like it's an abnormality. I think that's the right word for it. And also, I think like good times, like when I was in like Aurora Behavior Health Center, I was like, we were in like I was there for 2 weeks, and for like a week and a half, I wasn't even allowed to like go outside. And I feel like that's a really important for like, especially for like again growing kids to like be able to go outside, and also like yeah, and the healthcare stuff. So yeah, I definitely agree. So
Yeah,
yeah. Thank you, Skylar, for
no
coming with
problem,
some of your time to tune in and talk to me on my podcast. I really
for
appreciate
sure.
it. And to everyone here, please come for the next episode of the podcast. I don't know what it's about yet. I really have no idea. So but you should join. It's going to be cool, and yeah, and we're going to bring a lot of awareness. So thank you everyone so much for watching. Goodbye. Have a great night.